The trouble with maths is not so much maths itself, but the way in which it's taught.
Authorised by the Queensland Government, Brisbane.
It's just like I read it and no, goes in no.
I'm going to be an hairdresser. I'm not going to need to know what x times 2 pi r, whatever it is. I won't need to know that. You don't need to know that in hairdressing.
She's right. Who does need to know what 2 pi r means? Do you? Think about it for a minute. Since you left school, assuming you've left school, have you ever actually had to use pi in your entire life? I haven't. Then I don't make bicycle wheels.
Cannonball! When do you need to find the area of a triangle in life? It's so pointless.
Well, what do you think? Is she right? Is it pointless calculating the area of a triangle? Can you think of a time when you've needed to calculate the area of a triangle in real life for something useful to help you lead your life? Is this going to help you manage your finances or cope with the strains and struggles of everyday existence? I suppose if you were going to pave your floor with triangular-shaped tiles, it might be useful. I can't think of another example offhand. Maybe you can. If you can, write a comment.
You and I live in houses and we appreciate the houses we live in. It doesn't mean we need to know how to lay bricks.
That's right.
So why, just because mathematics is underlying some of our technologies in our life, why does that mean we have to understand it or even appreciate it?
That's a very good point. And likewise, people say, well, we fly airplanes without necessarily understanding the, the physics of flight. But there is a difference. There is a lot of opportunity for misuse of mathematics and for manipulating us, where there is no mathematics, there is no freedom. So mathematics is essential to our freedom, to the functioning of our democracy. That's why it's not just about finding out how some things work, which you don't need to know about because, who cares, as long as they work. I think that our ignorance can be misused by the powers that be. And for us to be the citizens in this new and brave new world, we have to be more aware of mathematics. We have to know and appreciate its power to do good, but also to do ill.
If you can see the things as they are, and you don't put yourself in between those things. If the things are white, just see them white. If the things are black, see them black. If your vision is clear, if your vision is right, it means you are not deluded at all. Illusion go away.
I got an F. I didn't answer any of the questions. I don't understand math. I'm lousy at it. I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing.
Good.
Huh?
Maybe now you're ready to start.
Have you ever found yourself saying, I can't believe my eyes? Have you ever had the experience of seeing something that just doesn't make sense? It's impossible. Have you ever had the experience of seeing something that does make sense, that does seem to be possible, but actually turns out to be a magic trick? We don't see what is right in front of our eyes because we don't see with our eyes. We see with our minds. And what is in your mind before you look at something greatly affects what you think you're looking at. And when that something that you're looking at is yourself, you don't see the real you. You see what you think is you. You see what you think you know. And like Kevin, it's only when you realize you don't know that you're able to start. You're able to start to begin to see clearly, to see white as white and black as black.
Let me start by asking the question, why are we learning maths? In particular, why should everyone in the world learn maths? Well, I think there are three reasons you can really come up with. The first is technical jobs. Technical jobs drive economies more than anything else. Virtually every study has shown that the ability at doing maths, and therefore STEM, drives economic progress and the individual's economic capabilities. So it's very important for our economies that people learn maths. The second one is just everyday living. To survive in any economy, and particularly in developed ones, you need to be far more quantitative than ever before. Whether it's dealing with mortgages or deciding whether to believe governments, it's pretty important to know whether to have some way of feeling mathematics, to feel whether you can trust the answer, be able to set up and understand problems.
He's right. But he's got them in the wrong order. The first and most important reason for learning maths is that you really do need it for your everyday life. Not just for mortgages, but other things, like riding a bike. How long does it take to stop? Or driving a car. How long does it take to stop? How far will you travel? If you hit the brakes as hard as you can at 60 kilometers an hour, how far will you travel? Will the car travel before you stop? Before you hit the mother and her pram? And if you are that mother, how much is that baby going to cost you? How long will you have to look after it? How long will you have to support it? How much will it cost? So should you buy that pair of shoes, or should you save the money because your baby's going to need it in 10 years' time?
I don't blame the teachers because, they are in a precarious and really unenviable position oftentimes because they are, overworked and underpaid. And also teachers themselves are the products of the same flawed system.
What is mathematics? What do we mean when we say we're doing it or we're learning it? Well, I think there are about 4 steps to mathematics. In a sense, it's a process. The first step is posing the right question. If you ask the wrong question about a situation, you're almost always going to get the wrong answer. So you need to ask the right question about your situation, and then you need to turn that from the real world into a maths formulation. Put it into a specific maths setup so that you can do step 3, calculate it. Calculating means taking it from your setup to the answer in a mathematical form. And then step 4 is taking that mathematical answer and turning it back into the real world and, crucially, verifying it. Here's the crazy thing. Around the world, we're taking about 80% of students' time in schools doing step 3 by hand. And yet that's the one step that computers can do better than any human. We should be using computers to do step 3, except in a few edge cases where it is still useful to do mental arithmetic and things. And we should be using students to do far more of steps 1, 2, and 4. We don't want students to be third-rate computers. We want them to be first-rate problem solvers.
But there is a difference. There is a lot of opportunity for misuse of mathematics and for manipulating us. Where there is no mathematics, there is no freedom. So mathematics is essential to our freedom, to the functioning of our democracy.
I quoted the Trilateral Commission view of the educational system, namely it's a system of indoctrination of the young. And I think that's correct. It's a system of indoctrination of the young. That was the way the liberal elites regard it, and they're more or less accurate. So the educational system is supposed to train people to be obedient, conformist, not think too much, do what you're told, stay passive, don't cause any crises of democracy, don't raise any questions, and so on. That's basically what the system is about. Even the fact that the system has a lot of stupidity in it, I think, has a function. You know, it means that people are filtered out for obedience. If you can guarantee lots of stupidity in the educational system, you know, like stupid assignments and things like that, you know that the only people who will make it through are people like me and like most of you, I guess, who are willing to do it no matter how stupid it is, because we want to go to the next step, you know. So you may know that this assignment is idiotic and the guy up there couldn't think his way out of a paper bag, but you'll do it anyway because that's the way you get to the next class, and you want to make it and so on and so forth. Well, there are people who don't do that, you know. There are people who say, I'm not going to do it, it's too ridiculous, you know. Those people are called behavioral problems, or something like that. They end up in the principal's office or in the streets or selling drugs or whatever. And all of this is a technique for selection for obedience. And I don't know how to prove this, but I have a feeling that when you go to the elite universities, you find more obedience and conformity, probably because you're getting the students who were better able to do it, you know. Well, all of that is functional. That's the way it works. And it works right through graduate school. I mean, by the time you get to graduate school, it's already a little more varied because some real contradictions develop in the system. The problem is that you can't have progress this way. You know, now especially in the sciences and engineering, that's a problem because the corporations need science and engineering. You know, if you don't have innovation, you're really in trouble. So they have to encourage creativity and independence because you can't get anywhere if you just copy what somebody told you. You have to be challenging things all the time, challenging everything, you know, and thinking new thoughts and so on. And there you got a real contradiction. It's hard to train people to be creative and challenging and so on, and yet to ensure that somewhere else in their lives they're conformist and obedient and never think. So you have problems. It's a serious problem in Japan, incidentally. We think of Japan as this tremendous superpower, but that's very misleading. Japan, for example, is very poor in science, for example, and they're aware of it. And part of the reason is it's part of the same thing that makes them good workers, obedient workers. It's a very obedient society, very deferential and conformist society. And one effect of that is that there are real constraints against independent, free thinking, and you see it in the sciences very clearly. But it's a problem here too. So there are those contradictions, and when you get to graduate school, they're beginning to show up. They show up much less in the ideological subjects, because there it doesn't matter so much if people have, profits aren't made by historians having original ideas about the French Revolution, so they can have conventional ideas. And that means that the pressure to try to support innovation and freedom is much less, and the pressures for conformity, on the other hand, are much greater. Because in the ideological subjects, it begins to be dangerous if people think the wrong thoughts. It's not so dangerous if they have new ideas about physics. But nevertheless, you begin to get a little flux in the system by the time you get to graduate school. And even at lower levels, you find it. I mean, there are teachers who do stimulate thought, and sometimes they get away with it. And all the way through, if people are learning things, you just can't control, you can't make them just regurgitate what they heard. Now, there's a lot of pressure to turn the schools into the Marine Corps, and there's a lot of support for it. For example, there's this bestseller last couple of years by Alan Bloom. That was all over the supermarkets, Closing of the American Mind. Huge bestseller, supermarket racks, which is where I read it, and things like that. Well, you take a look at what he's saying, and there was plenty, a lot of enthusiastic accolades for it and so on. He was saying that a couple of us smart guys will decide what the great thoughts are, and every student will memorize them, and that's education. Okay. Well, that's a way to turn people into pure automata. I mean, even if they happen to pick the great thoughts, there is no way less likely to get anybody to think about those thoughts than to make that the curriculum. That finishes them off, and I think that's the purpose, really. I mean, the purpose is just to impose authority, Here's the great thoughts. All this other stuff is rubbish. Just learn those and you're okay. I'll pick them, you memorize them. That's basically the line. Now, of course, that's the opposite of education. I mean, that's the way you study Talmud or something like that. But it's very popular, and I think it reflects the same concern over the crisis of democracy. In fact, Bloom himself was extremely, the incident that really got to him was a case in Cornell where he was a professor, where some black students took over one of the buildings. And he said that's just like the Nazis, you know, it's back to the Nazis. He has a whole business about the Nazis and so on and so forth. Well, you take a look at what happened in that. He doesn't tell you what he thought and he says the faculty capitulated, you know, just like Heidegger capitulated to the Nazis and so on. What actually happened, if you look back, is that there were real grievances. Undoubtedly, the students shouldn't have done what they did and go into the building with guns and so on, but it was settled very amicably. It was settled amicably, nobody was killed. The grievances were to some extent dealt with, and the net result was better than it was before. Well, he doesn't tell you what he thought they should have done, but it's sort of implicit. I mean, I guess they should have bombed the place or something like that. But that's what really set him off. And in general, what set many people off was the 60s are now described in the literature as if it was a time when students were running around burning libraries and, you know, destroying the foundations of civilization and so on. What was actually going on is they were asking questions. You know, they were raising questions. They were looking into things that people hadn't looked into before. They were not just obedient. And from the point of view of a lot of the faculty, that's equivalent to burning the buildings. You know, you can't have that small distinction. You can't make that. There's pressure to turn the schools back to the days when you didn't have to worry about those things, like disobedient students asking questions about things that you didn't tell them to think about and so on.